The fallen throne, the night sky of Valor Prime, earned with falling ships. Smoke rose from broken palaces, towers cracked, and flames painted the alien capital in red. The Queen of Valor, once feared across the stars, now lay on the cold stone floor of her ruined throne room, her silver crown cracked, her wings torn, and her loyal guards gone. Her empire had betrayed her, her generals turned against her, and her family had abandoned her. For the first time in her long reign, she was alone. She tried to rise, but her legs shook. Her claws slipped against the shattered tiles, and her breath came out ragged. Her enemies were close. She could hear their machines outside, grinding. Forward, searching for her final breath. The galaxy believed the queen would die here. Forgotten, just another ruler, broken by her own pride. But that night, someone else entered the ruined palace. Not an alien noble, not a betrayer, not a soldier of her empire. It was a human. His boots echoed in the empty hall, his armor scarred from battles, his rifle strapped to his back. His name was Captain Elias Ward, though in this galaxy he was nothing more than a forgotten mercenary. Yet his eyes did not look at her with fear or hatred. They looked at her with something she had never seen before: calm. Steady pity, the queen hissed, trying to lift her chin. "You should run, human," she whispered, her voice weak but sharp. "My enemies will come for me, and they will crush anyone at my side." Elias did not move back. Instead, he slowly walked closer, his hand resting lightly near his weapon, his steps careful. "I don't run," he said simply. "I've seen too many fall because no one reached out a hand." The queen stared at him in disbelief. Why would a human, a creature mocked as weak and young by the galaxy, offer help to her, the ruler who once swore to enslave Earth? It made no sense. It was madness. Her pride screamed at her to refuse, to spit in his face, to rise on her own or die. But her body betrayed her. Her arms trembled. Her legs could not move. For the first time, she felt the cold taste of helplessness. Elias knelt beside her. His shadow covered her broken form, and for a moment the ruined throne room was silent. Then he extended his hand, rough and scarred, a soldier's hand. "Stand," he said quietly, but firmly. "Stand and fight again on your feet, not on your knees." The queen's heart pounded. Every part of her wanted to refuse, yet something deeper, something buried under years of command, shifted inside her. She reached out, her claw trembling, and placed it in his hand. The moment their hands touched, it felt like the shattered air itself held its breath. With a grunt, Elias pulled her up, her broken crown slipping from her head and clattering on the floor. The sound echoed like the death of an empire, but also the birth of something new. The queen stood, unsteady but upright, supported by the human who should have been her enemy. Her golden eyes locked on his, filled with confusion, pride, and a spark of something dangerous: respect. "You are a fool," she muttered, but her voice carried less venom. "You risk your life for a queen who has nothing left." Elias gave a small shrug. "Then maybe it's time you fight for something else." Before she could answer, the sound of heavy doors crashing open shook the hall. Enemy soldiers marched in, their weapons raised, their armor glowing with the sigil of the traitor general who had stolen her throne. The queen tensed, her claws twitching, but her body still weak. Elias stepped forward, placing himself between her and the soldiers. His rifle slid into his hands with practiced ease. The enemy commander sneered when he saw them. A human? He laughed. The great Queen of Valor reduced to hiding behind a fragile death-worlder. But Elias did not flinch. He raised his weapon, his voice steady as stone. "Fragile or not," he said, "I'm still standing. Let's see how long you last." The first shots lit up the ruined throne room, sparks flying, stone breaking, the air thick with fire and smoke. The queen watched, stunned, as the human fought with ferocity, his movements sharp, his courage unshaken. Every bullet, every step was a shield that kept her alive. Her mind whispered that this made no sense, that she should not feel this spark in her chest. But another voice inside her, the voice of survival, of something older, told her the truth. She was no longer the queen who ruled alone. She had fallen, and in her fall, a human had given her his strength, and for reasons she did not yet understand, she would follow him. The battle raged, smoke rising, and outside the ruined palace, the galaxy waited. None knew that history had just shifted. None knew that tonight an alien queen had risen again, not as a ruler of her people, but as the blade of a human. Asterisk the touch of humanity. The throne room was filled with the stench of smoke and blood. Elias stood over fallen enemies, his rifle still warm, the echoes of battle ringing in the vast chamber. The queen leaned against a cracked pillar, her body weak but her golden eyes sharp, watching this strange human who fought like a storm. For years she had seen armies march, fleets clash, and champions rise. But never had she seen a single man fight with such reckless courage. "You kill without fear," she whispered, her voice rough. Elias reloaded his weapon calmly, not even glancing at her. "I don't fight for crowns or empires," he said. "I fight because I refuse to kneel." The word struck her deeper than she expected. Her whole life, she had commanded others to kneel. She had believed obedience was power. But here stood a man who obeyed no throne, no crown, no queen, and yet she had taken his hand. She had risen because of him. Outside, the enemy regrouped. Marching feet thundered through the broken streets, and distant war machines rolled closer. The queen's breath caught her strength, had not returned, and without armies, she was vulnerable. Her people had abandoned her, but this human did not move. He looked at her as if she was still worth saving. "Why?" she demanded suddenly, anger in her voice, her claws curled, her pride burning. "Why risk your life for me? I would have enslaved your species without hesitation. I would have crushed your world like ash." Elias turned to her, his eyes steady. "Maybe," he admitted, "but right now you're broken, and no one deserves to be left to die in the dirt. Not even a queen." For a moment she could not speak. The galaxy was cruel. Every empire ruled by strength and betrayal. But this soldier had shown her something alien to her world. Mercy. The doors at the far end of the hall groaned again. More enemies forcing their way inside. The queen's claws trembled. Ready to fight, but knowing her body could not keep pace, Elias stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his tone calm but sharp. The words stung her pride, yet something inside her shifted. She, the queen who once commanded galaxies, obeyed. She leaned against the wall and watched as he unleashed another storm of fire, cutting down every soldier who dared step closer. When the hall finally fell silent, only the crackle of flames remained. Elias lowered his weapon and scanned the room. The queen's chest rose and fell quickly, not from battle, but from confusion. She had followed his command, and it felt different, not weakness, but something sharper, something dangerous. "You fight like a beast," she muttered, her voice softer now. "And yet you protect like—" She stopped, searching for the word. "Like something my people do not understand." Elias gave her a faint smile, though his face was tired. "Where I come from, we don't leave people behind." The queen tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. "Even your enemies?" she asked. His silence was answer enough, before she could press further. A deep boom shook the ground. The traitor general himself had arrived, bringing a walking war machine that tore through the city like a beast of metal and fire. The queen's breath turned cold. She had fought beside that general once. She knew his cruelty, his hunger for power. Now he came to finish what he started, to claim her head and prove her reign truly dead. Elias checked his rifle. His jaw set, he glanced at her. "Can you stand?" She tried to move, but her legs trembled, pain lancing through her body. "I can stand," she hissed, forcing herself upright. But Elias shook his head. "Then stand with me, but take my orders, or neither of us will leave this place alive." 4. The first time in her life, she hesitated. She had commanded entire fleets, but never had she been asked to follow. The idea was foreign, shameful, yet thrilling. Her pride screamed, but her survival whispered something else. Trust him. When the war machine tore through the doors, fire spilling into the hall, Elias gave his first command. Flank left draw its attention. The queen obeyed, her claws flashing as she struck. Her pride buried beneath instinct, the machine roared, turning toward her. Now. Elias shouted, and he leapt from cover, firing into its exposed core. The explosion shook the palace, rubble falling, smoke flooding the chamber. When it was over, the machine lay in twisted metal, its lights fading. The queen, coughing from the thigh. Smoke looked at the human, her body trembling from exhaustion. You gave me orders," she whispered, her voice sharp but not hateful. "And I obeyed." Elias looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because you trusted me," he said, her chest tightened, her claws curling against the stone. Trust, mercy, obedience. These were words that had no place in her empire. Yet here, with one human, they became something stronger than power. The queen sank to one knee, not out of weakness, but something deeper. Her voice was low, heavy, filled with a truth she could no longer deny. "You gave me strength when my throne was dust," she said. "From this moment, I will follow you." Elias said nothing, only helped her rise again. And outside, the galaxy shifted, though none yet knew. A queen had bent her pride, and a human had gained her loyalty. The first thread of fear spread across the stars, because if one queen obeyed a human, what would happen if all of humanity rose? Asterisk the broken empire. The fires of the palace still burned as dawn came. Ash drifted across the broken city. Smoke coiled into the pale sky, and silence spread where once armies marched. The queen stood at the shattered balcony. Her once great empire, now nothing but ruins stretching to the horizon. Below, the streets of Valor Prime were filled with fear, whispers spreading among the survivors. Their queen still lived, yet she was no longer the queen they remembered. Behind her, Elias checked his weapon with quiet focus. He did not bow, did not speak with reverence, and did not treat her as a ruler. To him, she was simply another fighter standing on unstable ground. And strangely, she did not hate it. She felt something she had never felt before a human's presence steadying her pride. "You see it now," Elias said, his voice calm but sharp. "Your empire was built on chains and fear." He looked out over the ruins, his scarred face lit by firelight. And fear is fragile one crack, and it shatters. The queen's claws tightened against the balcony rail. His words cut deeper. Then blades. Her generals had betrayed her, her armies had scattered, and even her people had turned their eyes away. In her heart, she knew Elias was right. Her empire had broken long before the first stone fell. It had been rotting in silence, and she had been too proud to see it. Suddenly, a messenger drone screeched across the sky, its metal wings burning as it released its signal. A voice echoed from its speakers, cruel and mocking. "All hear this. The Queen of Valor is fallen, her throne taken, her bloodline erased." The words spread across the city like poison. Citizens cowered, unsure whether to mourn or rejoice. The galaxy beyond would hear the same message her empire was dead, and the traitor general now ruled. The queen's chest tightened, rage burning in her veins. But before she could speak, Elias stepped forward, his eyes hard. "Let them believe it," he said. The queen turned, shocked. "You would let them spit on my name? You would let them call me dead?" Elias held her gaze. "Yes," he answered coldly. Because a ghost can move in ways an empress cannot. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, the queen's anger faded into thought. A ghost. Yes, a ghost could. Strike without warning, unseen, feared. Perhaps her throne had broken, but from the ashes, something more dangerous could rise. Her golden eyes narrowed. "What would you have me do, human?" she asked, her voice steady but low. Elias did not flinch. "Follow my orders," he said, "and together we'll make them regret ever thinking you were weak." The queen's pride screamed against the words, but her heart, still echoing with his mercy and strength, bent instead of breaking. "I obey," she whispered, her voice like a blade drawn in the dark. Far beyond the city, the galaxy trembled. Reports spread of a strange sight: the queen, alive, walking beside a human soldier. At first, many laughed. How could the great queen lower herself to follow one of the youngest species in the stars? But as the reports grew, the laughter turned to unease, because every battle that followed ended the same way. Elias gave the command, and the queen struck with lethal precision. In the smuggler ports, whispers spread. "They say the human gives." "Her orders," one alien muttered. "And she obeys," another answered, shivering. "That is not possible," a third said. "Queens do not kneel." But deep down, they all knew something impossible had already begun. Meanwhile, the traitor general tightened his grip on the throne. He unleashed fleets to hunt them, broadcasting her shame to every corner of the galaxy. But the more he spat on her name, the more her legend grew darker, sharper. The fallen queen, who now walked as a weapon of humanity. The broken empire that was no longer hers, but theirs. One night, as they moved through the ruined outer districts, the queen paused by the burned remains of a statue her own likeness, toppled and defaced. Once, such insult would have filled her with fury. Now, she only studied it with cold eyes. "Do you think they hate me?" she asked Elias, her voice strange. He did not hesitate. "Yes," he said, "but they fear you more." The queen tilted her head. "And you? Do you fear me, human?" Elias gave a small, hard smile. "No," he said, "because I don't follow empires, I make them fall." Her breath caught, her chest tightening with a feeling she could not name. This human was dangerous, not because he feared nothing, but because he carried something stronger than power, conviction. And in that moment, she understood. Her broken empire no longer mattered. The galaxy had shifted, and its center was no longer her throne. It was the man who stood beside her. The queen lowered her head slightly, her voice almost a whisper. "Then let the empire burn," she said. "From its ashes, I will rise again, not as a queen of Valor, but as your weapon." And in the shadows of the ruined city, with smoke rising to the stars, a new empire began to form. Not of crowns or chains, but of fear, whispers, and the loyalty of one fallen queen to a single human. The galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk the first trial. The ruins of Valor Prime lay behind them, but the war had only just begun. Elias and the queen moved through the shadow of broken cities, hunted by fleets and betrayed by spies. Everywhere they went, whispers followed of a queen who no longer commanded, but obeyed. The galaxy laughed at first, but laughter turned to unease, and unease soon hardened into fear. The first true test came sooner than expected. A warlord, once loyal to the queen, but now sworn to the traitor general, gathered his forces in the deserts of Kareth. He wanted to prove to the galaxy that the queen's loyalty to a human was weakness. He sent a message across the stars. "Bring me her head, and I will give you her crown." The queen's golden eyes burned with fury when she heard it. She had faced countless challengers before, but never as a servant. Never with another giving her orders. Her pride roared inside her chest, demanding she crush the warlord herself. But Elias shook his head, his voice calm. "No," he said. "Not this time. You don't fight alone anymore." His words cut sharp, but not cruel, and though it pained her, she obeyed. They traveled through the dust storms of Kerith. The sky was blood-red, lightning tearing across the horizon. The queen's steps were heavy, but steady. Her body regaining strength, Elias walked beside her, silent but alert, his weapon always ready. There was no army at their back, no fleet above them, just a human and a queen, preparing to face an enemy who commanded legions. When they reached the warlord's camp, the desert howled around them. Tents stretched like a sea of shadows. Soldiers armed with blades and plasma rifles. At the center stood the warlord himself, taller than most. His armor spiked, his face scarred. He looked at the queen with mocking eyes. "So this is what you've become," he sneered. A broken ruler hiding behind a fragile creature of earth. The queen's claws twitched, her pride burning like fire. But before she could speak, Elias stepped forward. "She doesn't hide behind me," he said, his voice steady as iron. "She fights through me." The warlord laughed, a cruel, booming sound. "Then I will break you first, human, and watch her crawl back to my throne." With a signal, his soldiers surged forward, blades flashing, rifles blazing. The desert erupted into fire and screams. Elias moved like a storm, every shot precise, every step calculated. But the enemy was many, and their numbers closed around them like a noose. The queen roared, her voice shaking the air. She had sworn to obey, but her blood demanded battle. Elias's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Flank, right, cut their line. Without hesitation, she obeyed. Her claws tore through alien steel. Her wings slashed against armored bodies. The soldiers who once bowed to her now screamed as she struck them down, not as their queen, but as the blade of a human. The warlord watched, his sneer fading as he realized the truth. Every movement of the queen matched the human's commands. Together, they fought not as two separate warriors, but as one force, and that force was unstoppable. Still, the warlord charged, his massive blade glowing with energy. He swung at Elias with crushing strength. The human barely rolled aside. The ground splitting where the strike landed, Elias fired, but the warlord's armor deflected the shots. The queen lunged, but the warlord caught her with a brutal strike. Slamming her into the sand, the warlord raised his blade, ready to end her life. But Elias's voice thundered over the chaos. "Now!" The queen's eyes blazed. Obeying without thought, she rolled, caught the warlord's arm with her claws, and pinned him for a heartbeat. It was enough. Elias leapt forward, pressing his rifle to the exposed joint of the warlord's armor, and fired. The explosion ripped through flesh and steel, the warlord roaring as he fell. Silence spread across the battlefield. The warlord's soldiers froze, their leader broken, his weapon buried in the sand. All eyes turned to the queen and the humans standing together over his fallen body. The queen, her chest heaving, stepped closer to the dying warlord. "You called me broken," she hissed, her voice sharp with venom. "But it is you who kneels before a human's strength." The warlord tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. The queen struck once, ending him. Gasps rippled across the battlefield. And in that moment, the soldiers knew the queen was no longer theirs. She was his. Elias lowered his weapon, his gaze steady. The queen turned to him, her pride burning, her voice low. "I obeyed your command," she said, almost in disbelief. "And together we crushed him." Elias nodded once. "Because together we're stronger than their empires." The queen's golden eyes lingered on him. For the first time, she felt no shame in obedience, only power, power born not from ruling alone, but from following a human's voice. The desert wind carried the whispers to every corner of Kerith. A human had commanded the Queen of Valor, and she had obeyed. An empire had fallen, but something greater had begun, and in the shadows of the galaxy, Others began to fear. If one human could command a queen, what would happen when all of Earth stood behind him? Asterisk chains shattered. The desert of Kerith still burned with the memory of battle. The warlord's corpse lay buried beneath the shifting sands. His army scattered, their faith shattered. And yet, even in victory, the queen felt the weight of invisible chains. The galaxy still called her fallen, still whispered her name with mockery, and worst of all, her own people looked at her with doubt. As they traveled through the wastelands, survivors began to appear. Once loyal subjects who had fled the warlord's wrath now crawled from hiding. They saw their queen alive, but not the same as before. No crown, no crone, no command. Instead, she walked beside a human, obeying his words as if her life belonged to him. Among the survivors were former nobles, their robes torn but their voices sharp. They knelt before her, but their eyes burned with questions. One of them dared to speak. "My queen, we have followed you through blood and fire, but tell us, why do you bend to this human?" The queen's chest tightened, her claws flexing at her side. Once, she would have silenced such insolence with death, but now she hesitated, because the truth was heavier than any crown. She did obey him, and she no longer felt shame in it. Before she could answer, Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but edged. "She bends because she chooses to," he said. His eyes swept across the nobles, cold and unflinching. "And choice is something none of you ever gave her." The words struck the queen like a blade to the heart. She turned sharply, her golden eyes wide. Choice? It was true. Her entire reign had been built on chains others chained to her will, and she chained to her throne. Never once had she chosen freely. Until now, the nobles hissed with anger, one stepping forward. "You disgrace the crown." "You? Disgrace your blood. To obey a human is to admit weakness." The queen moved before Elias could answer. Her claws lashed out, striking the ground before the noble's feet, sending cracks through the stone. Her voice shook with fury, but it was clear. "Weakness is pretending power while standing alone." She hissed. "Strength is knowing when to follow the one who gave me freedom." The nobles recoiled, stunned. This was not the queen they remembered. This was something new, something terrifying. But before the moment could settle, shadows swept across the desert sky. Ships, enemy warships descending fast. The traitor general had sent hunters. The queen's people cried out, scattering for cover. Elias raised his rifle, his eyes hard. "They'll come for you first," he said. The queen's breath burned in her chest. "No," she growled. "They'll come for us." The hunters descended in fire and steel, their weapons tearing into the sands. The queen roared, her wings spreading, her strength no longer weak. She turned to Elias, her voice sharp but steady. "Give the order," she demanded. He glanced at her, then nodded. "Break their chains," he said simply. The queen obeyed. She leapt into the fire, her claws tearing. Open steel, her fury a storm. Elias moved with her, his rifle spitting fire, his voice cutting through the chaos. With commands she followed without question. Together, they tore through the hunters, their bodies falling across the sands. The battle was short, brutal, and final. When silence returned, the nobles stared at the battlefield, their fear shifting into awe. They had seen their queen fight before, but never like this. Every strike of her claws had been guided by the human's command, and together they had destroyed an army. The queen stood among the wreckage, her chest heaving. She turned to her people, her voice carrying a cross. "The desert? You ask why I obey," she said, her tone sharp as a blade. "You see the answer before you. I obey because he gave me freedom. I obey because his voice shatters the chains I never knew bound me." Her golden eyes burned with fire as she raised her claws. "No longer will. I rule with chains and fear. From this day I fight with him, and if you stand with me, then you will follow not my orders, but ours." the nobles fell silent, their pride broken, and then, one by one, they bowed not to a queen alone, but to the bond between queen and human. For the first time, the queen felt the chains inside her heart break. She was no longer a prisoner of her throne. She was free. Elias stood beside her, his rifle resting at his side. He said nothing, but the faint nod he gave her was enough. And in that moment, the galaxy shifted again, because now it was not only the queen who obeyed him, it was the beginning of an army. An army forged not from fear, but from choice. The traitor general would hear of this, and when he did, he would know. The chains he used to bind her had been shattered forever. Asterisk the march of fear. The desert victory spread like wildfire across the stars. Whispers carried faster than fleets, stories told in hidden ports and shadowed markets. The Queen of Valor lived, but she no longer ruled as before. Now she followed the voice of a human, and wherever his orders went, her claws struck with terrifying precision. The galaxy laughed at first, but laughter died when the reports continued. Warlords crushed, hunters destroyed, nobles bent to her new vow. Always the same story. The queen obeyed a human, and together they never lost. Elias knew what this meant. Fear was spreading, not only of her claws, but of him. In war councils across the stars, alien rulers asked the same question. If one human can command a queen, what happens when Earth itself rises? The traitor general, now seated on her throne, raged at the news. He ordered fleets to hunt them down. Entire warships darkened the skies of frontier worlds, but none were prepared for what they saw when they finally faced them. It happened on the world of Karos. A fleet of 10 warships descended. Expecting an easy kill, civilians ran, soldiers braced, but when the dust cleared, it was not an army that stood against them. It was only a single human and a queen. The captains laughed at first, but then the queen stepped forward, her wings spreading. She turned her head, waiting. Elias's voice cut through the silence, sharp and commanding. Strike their leader, show them what fear really means. The queen obeyed in a blur of motion. She launched herself skyward, claws tearing through metal. She ripped into the lead warship, her roar shaking the battlefield. The ship burned, screaming down into the sand, and the other 9 froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then the whispers began. She obeyed him, the soldiers gasped. The queen waits for his command. The captains hesitated, their pride battling with their terror. But hesitation was death. Elias gave his next order, and the queen struck again. By the time the smoke cleared, half the fleet was burning, and the rest fled into the stars. The people of Karos poured from hiding, their voices rising in awe. To them, the queen was no longer a fallen ruler. She was something greater, a weapon sharpened by human hands. That night, as they rested by the ruined battlefield, the queen sat in silence. Her golden eyes flickered in the firelight as she watched Elias clean his weapon. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but heavy. "They fear us now," she said. "Not because of my throne, not because of my crown, but because I obey your voice." Elias looked up, his expression unreadable. "Fear is a weapon," he said, "but it cuts both ways. If they fear you too much, they'll unite to destroy you." The queen tilted her head. "And if they fear you?" she asked. Elias gave a faint, cold smile. "Then they'll finally see humanity for what it is." Before she could answer, alarms blared across the horizon. Scouts rushed into the camp. An even greater fleet was coming. Dozens of ships, not just hunters, but full war cruisers. The traitor general had grown desperate. He would crush them now, or risk losing his throne forever. The queen rose, her claws flexing, her body strong again. She turned to Elias, her voice steady. "Give me." "The order," she said. Her golden eyes burned with a fire she had never known before. Not pride, not hunger, but something sharper, Loyalty, Elias studied her for a long moment. This was the same queen who once ruled empires. But now she stood waiting, silent, ready to obey, and he realized the truth. Her power was no longer hers alone. It was theirs. He finally spoke, his words quiet but heavy. Then march with me. Let the galaxy see that fear walks on 2 feet, mine and yours. And so they marched, through the burning fields of Karos, their steps echoing across the world. Above them, the enemy fleet descended, fire raining from the skies, but neither human nor queen flinched, because fear no longer belonged to the galaxy. It belonged to them. The march of fear had begun, and the stars themselves would tremble at its sound. A throne rebuilt, the skies of Karos split open with fire. Dozens of war cruisers descended, their shadows stretching across the broken land. The traitor general had unleashed his full might, determined to crush the queen once and for all. Civilians fled underground, soldiers trembled in their bunkers. All believed the human and his queen would be swept away by the storm. But Elias Ward did not tremble. He stood on the battlefield, rifle in hand, his face lit by the glow of burning skies. Beside him, the Queen of Valor spread her wings wide, her claws gleaming. For the first time, she bowed her head, not in shame, but in loyalty. "Give the word, human," she said, her golden eyes steady, "and I will tear the stars down for you." Elias raised his gaze to the descending fleet. His voice was calm, but it carried like thunder across the battlefield. "Then rise," he commanded. "Rise and show them why fear belongs to us." The queen launched into the sky, a streak of shadow and fire. Her roar shook the heavens as she struck the first warship, tearing through steel like paper. Explosions lit the sky, and the fleet faltered. The soldiers below gasped. She was not fighting as their queen. She was fighting as his blade. A traitor general's flagship descended, a monstrous vessel crowned with stolen banners. From its command deck he sneered, "You are nothing but a ghost, queen, and ghosts cannot rule the living." But Elias's voice carried over the combs, steady and cold. "Ghosts don't rule. General, they haunt, and tonight it is you who will be haunted." The battle tore across land and sky. The queen fought with fury, every strike guided by Elias's orders. She tore apart engines, shredded command decks, and carved a path through the enemy fleet. Elias on the ground directed survivors, rallying soldiers who once bowed to fear. Now they followed him, and for the first time, the galaxy saw human leadership not in whispers, but in fire. The traitor general, furious, descended from his flagship in a mech of iron and plasma, a towering machine armed with cannons that shook the battlefield. He landed before Elias, the ground cracking beneath his weight. "I will crush you myself, human," he roared. "Then drag her back in chains." The queen landed beside Elias, her body bloodied but unbroken. Her claws gleamed as she spread her wings. "You will never chain me again," she growled. "Not while his voice guides me." The battle was brutal. The general's mech struck, with devastating power, forcing them back. Elias dodged blasts. Firing with precision, the queen struck again and again. But the mech's armor held strong. Each hit shook the earth, dust and fire filling the air. Finally, the general caught the queen in his mech's claws, lifting her high. "You obey him?" He spat. "Then watch him die as your last act of loyalty." But Elias's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. "Now, queen!" Break his hold. The queen's golden eyes blazed. With a roar, she twisted, her claws ripping through the mech's joints. Tearing metal apart, she broke free, and Elias fired into the exposed core. The mech erupted in flame, the traitor screaming as he fell. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire. The general's body lay in the wreckage. His reign ended. The queen stood over him, her chest heaving, but she did not look at his corpse. She turned instead to Elias, her golden eyes steady. "The throne is mine again," she said softly, "but I will not sit upon it." The nobles, soldiers, and survivors gathered, watching in awe as she knelt before the human. "I was a queen of chains," she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "But he broke those chains. From this day, my throne is rebuilt not on fear, but on loyalty to him. He is my master, and through him, humanity rises." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A queen kneeling to a human. It was unthinkable, and yet no one could deny what they had seen. One human had commanded a queen, destroyed a fleet, and ended a tyrant's rule. Elias said nothing. For a long moment, his rifle heavy in his hands. Finally, he looked out at the survivors. "Then hear this," he said, his voice calm but unshakable. "The age of chains is over. The age of humanity has begun." And in the silence that followed, the galaxy trembled. A throne had been rebuilt, but not as it was before, not a seat of alien pride, but a bond of human strength and alien loyalty. The queen who once ruled alone now followed the voice of a single human, and the stars themselves whispered a new truth. If one man could command a queen, what army could ever stand against all of humanity?